All right, so today we're going to focus on early writing. And so the first thing I want us to do is I'm going to show us a clip from author and illustrator Oliver Jeffers, who many of you probably know from The Day the Crayons Quit and The Day the Crayons Came Home. So let's watch a video clip about his writing process, and I want you to think about, after watching Oliver Jeffers, what implications does it have for your classroom in terms of the writing process and in terms of the way that you could structure or restructure your classroom to include some ideas from what we see. All right, so let's click on this.
Who are you?
I'm Oliver. Oh, sorry. Is that better?
My name's Oliver Jeffers.
My name is Oliver.
I draw pictures and I tell stories. I just think picture books are a fascinating platform for telling stories, for putting words and pictures together. People are often very curious, because I write and illustrate the books, which comes first, the words or the pictures. And the truth is that they actually happen both at the same time. They grow up together. I get my ideas from everywhere. You just never know when you're going to get an idea, so that's why I always carry a pencil and a piece of paper. Why I make picture books? Because I feel compelled to. I have to. I have all these stories in my head and I just love telling stories. I'm from Northern Ireland, where storytelling is a very important part of the cultural heritage there. So I'll tell stories to anyone who's listening, and sometimes to people who aren't.
Once upon a time.
What do I do every day? My day changes all the time, but most often I'll wake up, it's usually the first thing. Then I will transport my body, sometimes walk, sometimes skateboard, sometimes cycle, Vespa, motorcycle, from where I sleep to where my pens are. And then I will begin drawing, writing lists, crossing things off lists, and then I stop for lunch. We'll go back to doing some drawing and writing and crossing things off lists, putting things in drawers. I like labeling things. People often ask me how I get started. Everything starts in the sketchbook. The first part is making all the drawings I can think of to try and figure out the story. Specifically talking about the Hueys. I remember I was in a restaurant when I had this idea. This is the piece of paper on which I first conceived the overall structure for the very first Hueys book. So once I know the overall arch of a story, its beginning, its middle, and its end, I then will start thumbnailing color tests for the skin color, for the type of pencil, covers. Then I'll do more detailed line art, and they will get dropped into a layout, and then I'll use those layouts to make the final art within any number of different mediums. Watercolor paint, collage, acrylic pencils, colored pencil, painting, oil digital. The way I'll make it will be whatever is the best way to make the idea as strong as possible. I'm really lucky. I get to do what I love for a living. I feel a sort of a sense of responsibility to enjoy that as much as I can.
So I think after watching Oliver Jeffers talk about his process, we can see that the writing process is not linear and that it is very recursive and sometimes messy, and sometimes we need to look at and learn from real authors and think about what is it that real authors do. And if we take note from Oliver Jeffers, we could really help think about some of our writers, that they don't necessarily have to write the words before the drawings, that sometimes it happens simultaneously, and the importance of keeping notes and keeping drawings, because they might not become a story today, but you might mine them for future use. And that he keeps a notebook, and his ideas usually come not during writing workshop or not during his specified time, right? But they come throughout the day. I know for myself, my best ideas usually come in the middle of the night or when I'm in the shower or when I'm driving. And so keeping that notebook with me allows me to keep track of my ideas for future writing. And so I think we can learn a lot from authors like Oliver Jeffers, and that they have real implications for our classrooms. So when we think about our youngest children, we need to think about how we develop their fine motor skills, because when we think about 3, 4, 5-year-olds, at 3 and 4, their pencil grip may be a fist grip, and we need to help them to develop that pincher grasp. So pinching between your thumb and your forefinger. And so we want to make sure that in preschool classrooms and in kindergarten, we design activities for them to develop that pincher grasp and develop their fine motor skills, which will ultimately help them to hold a pencil and help them with their writing. So things like picking up money, right, using the pincher grasp, or threading with pipe cleaners, threading through lacing, right? Lacing is important, or using clothespins to match colors. Anything that really helps them to develop that pincher grasp is really, really important, and an important part of early emergent writing. When we draw from Fountas and Pinnell in their section on encouraging early writers, they really focused on bookmaking, using various materials and space in the classroom, and helping students to build themselves and look at themselves as writers. And so when we think about why bookmaking is important, we want to remember that it's child-centered, that the children are the ones choosing the topic, and that they're the ones putting together and making and creating the book. And it's project-based, so they are using materials beyond just a pencil or crayons and paper to build their book. And it helps to reinforce the fact that books are real, that's a form of published writing, and that a single piece of paper is not a book, right? So Fountas and Pinnell were talking about the fact that just like when we watched Harold with Amanda conferring with him, she really focused on telling his story across pages and was helping to move him to that idea that a story occurs over pages. And we see that with authors, right? That their story occurs over pages and is within a book, because our young children will be writing many, many stories, and some of them will only last one page, and they might be writing pages and pages of mini stories. But eventually we want to scaffold them to see that stories can go across pages. And we want to keep in mind, as Fountas and Pinnell told us, that children should be choosing the topic and most often the genre. I know when we start moving to a workshop framework where we're looking at units of study that are genre-based, then students are boxed into, say, personal narrative or how-to books, nonfiction texts. But we need to remember that writers write about what they're experts in. And so Lucy Calkins does not write about math because she's not an expert in math education. She's an expert in reading and writing and literacy. And so she's going to write about what she knows. And we need to keep that in mind with our writers, that we have to encourage them to write about things that they know about, and they know best about their day, their family, things that they do. And then we have to, once we have those topics that they are experts in, we need to give them the time and space to create, to draw, to write, to put materials together to tell the story. And we want to teach them how to use all of the materials that we have available to them in the classroom. So if we expect them to use the stapler, we teach them and model for them how to use the stapler. If we expect them to use different pieces of paper and to make their choices, we have to model and scaffold them in how to make those choices. And all of that's very important to your classroom running smoothly and to kids being empowered. So the other important thing that Fountas and Pinnell and many authors talk about is building in time to share. That writers write for readers. And so having that share time is incredibly important on a regular basis. It does not have to happen daily. It could with partners or small groups, but that at the end of a particular unit of study, there's a celebration. And with younger kids, I would anticipate that you'd be sharing more often than that. We connect to exposing our kids to different genres through our read alouds, but also we want to look at our read alouds and look at the books that real authors write and help us to understand what does that mean for us as a writer? How does it help us to figure out what writers do? And so when we think about the genres and that we want to expose young children to, this was the list from Fountas and Pinnell. They really talked about informational books, how-to books, counting books, ABC books, poetry, series books, fiction, biography, autobiography, and then within those genres, really looking at what are specific text features. So teaching them and modeling who the author is and what the author does, who the illustrator is and what the illustrator does. So these are different text features that you might want to introduce to the young children in your classroom. Then it's also important to introduce the illustration technique. So for example, if you're looking at Eric Carle and the collage that he uses, and giving time for young children to explore those techniques. And, so that would mean availability of different materials. And again, the time and the space for kids to explore those techniques. I thought this site, I'm not going to click on it, but when you're in the PowerPoint on your own, you can click on this Pre-Kinder site and they have some great information on bookmaking for young children. So when we have children in our classroom working within writer's workshop or working within a writing block, we want to help them, encourage them to live like writers. So if we analyze Oliver Jeffers and we look at how he lives as a writer, we could actually share that clip with our students and share clips from other authors with our students to help them to see what is it that real writers do. They collect details and stories of their lives. And so are we offering children a space and a place to do that? And are we modeling it? And then not only collecting those ideas, but then scaffolding children in how to take those ideas and move them into a story. We write from our thinking and planning. So we saw Oliver Jeffers with lots of lists and labeling and crossing out, and that thinking and planning is really important. And that taking the time to think and mull over the possibilities for your writing. So writing is thinking, right? And so I ask you, do you give your kids the time to think and to talk with partners about the writing that they're doing? And for many of us, we don't. We just are moving through the unit or moving through our teaching points. And so we don't often think about making that time for thinking and talking. But these are different ways writers might live that we would want to model and scaffold kids into. And then many of you I know use something like a heart map, I think we mentioned from Georgia Hurd, or some sort of way for kids to keep topics that are important in their lives, whether it's through photographs or drawings, but helping kids to understand that stories come from their lives and they're the experts in their lives, and then having a place to have all of their ideas collected is important. So here are just some examples that I found. I think that align with some of the work that Fountas and Pinnell were talking about, where you have a project that's a story that's a collection of an illustration technique. And all of these, I think, show early bookmaking and writing in early classrooms. And then I don't want to forget about wordless picture books. I think wordless picture books are really, really helpful for our English learners or for our students who struggle with writing, because the ideas are there. They just have to maybe add the words to the story. And so you can use your iPhone or your smartphone and just use the voice recorder or a computer in your classroom, and they can orally tell the story along with the book, and then later put the words down if they're at that point. So wordless picture books, I think, are a great place to start with many of our students. So the next PowerPoint is going to move into interactive writing, but I'm going to stop this one now, and then I'll be back.